Right now, at least 11,200 unaccompanied children are in custody and care of the Administration for Children and Families, according to a spokesperson from the Department of Health and Human Services. And there's new criticism of the policy from religious leaders, some of whom are the same ones who supported President Trump. The Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution stating, quote, God commands his people to treat immigrants with the same respect and dignity as those native born. We desire to see immigration reform include an emphasis on securing our borders and providing a pathway to legal status, maintaining the priority of family unity. Joining me now is Ronald Vitiello, Acting Deputy Commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Sir, thank you for joining me. I noticed you've got a black bar across your shield. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost an intelligence officer outside of Grand Forks, North Dakota last Thursday, and we're memorializing him today, so we'll wear the mourning bands until that ceremony is complete.
All right, and I understand you also had a patrol agent shot at the Arizona border on Tuesday.
Yeah, another sobering reminder of how the border is sometimes a volatile place. One of our agents near Tucson, out in the brush, was attacked by smugglers, shot several times. But we're very grateful that he's highly trained and knew what to do in that situation, cared for himself, and he was wearing his ballistic vest. So we're very happy to report that he's been released from the hospital already, and we're looking for suspects. There are about 8 people in custody now. We're not sure whether or not they were involved. They were nearby the incident when it occurred.
Well, thank you for your service, and our thoughts are with your members. Let's talk about the issue at hand. You say that only migrants caught crossing illegally will be taken into custody and separated from their parents or from their children, but we've seen several reports of documented separation after families present themselves legally at a port of entry. Can you tell me what the actual case is here?
We have gotten a commitment from the Justice Department, namely the Attorney General, working with the Secretary of Homeland Security. We're not accepting any class of alien who crosses the border illegally between the ports of entry. And so when that occurs, we're referring those cases to prosecution. And if there happens to be a family, then they are temporarily separated while that prosecution occurs. And then there are steps within HHS and ICE detention to reunite those families once that process is complete.
And you're talking about between ports of entry. So if somebody comes in with a family and asks for asylum at a port of entry, they won't be separated from their children?
That's correct. That's the way the law works.
Okay, in a typical day, how many people are coming into the United States without authorization? Or how many people end up being arrested? Are you the front line? Are you the ones who arrest them?
It's about 1,500 a day, yeah. The Border Patrol is responsible for the area in between the ports of entry. So that's within CBP. But CBP also does the ports as well, so Customs and Border Protection at the ports of entry. So in between the ports, the Border Patrol will do that. And we've worked with the Justice Department to refer all cases of illegal entry of people who are crossing the border illegally.
And we've got reports of about 11,200 kids in 100 shelters. They're 95% full. At what point do these children leave your care and get handed over to HHS?
As soon as possible. Our role in CBP is to address their needs and then put them through sort of a book-in procedure, right? Set them up for a removal hearing, and then they're quickly transferred as quickly as we can into ICE transportation to an HHS facility if they come as unaccompanied minors. And that's the process as it is.
I mean, physically removing children from their parents has got to be heart-wrenching and extraordinarily difficult, regardless of how well you're trained, your officers are trained. How do you actually do that?
Well, a lot of us have our own family. These are men and women are parents themselves, and so they treat everybody with dignity and respect. But we do have a job to do, and we do want to deter this from happening. People are sending their children to the border all alone through the hands of smugglers and investing in that. We spend an inordinate amount of resources trying to rescue people that are on this journey. So we're trying to discourage this activity. There are loopholes in the law that don't allow us to hold people as a family unit for more than 20 days. That's a matter of immigration and case law. So we're trying to address this the best way we can. We know that when people have a consequence for illegal activity, they do less of it, and that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
What proportion of the children who get taken into custody and put into this care are children who have come alone, meaning not with their parents, versus those who are separated from their parents after these parents attempt to enter the United States?
So I saw your report earlier about the shelter in Brownsville. 70% of those 1,500 kids came to the border alone.
Alone, meaning not with their parents, perhaps with smugglers or
Yeah.
literally on their own.
Under the law, they're unaccompanied alien children. That's what the law treats, how the law treats them.
When they are separated from their parents, those who are separated from their parents, or for that matter, those who come alone and are put into these centers, is there some effort to ensure that they are in contact with their parents, or that parents are notified, or perhaps parental consent is sought for, as we were discussing? Thank you for watching this story, by the way, medical care or psychological care. Is there some connection to their parents once they're being held in custody?
Yes, they're given instructions at the beginning of the process how they can get in touch with their parents, and then on the back end, when the adjudication for their criminal case is done, then we work to reunite them. The shelters they're only in these shelters long enough to be reunited with a family member. That's the purpose of it.
We are hearing, though, as part of that report, that because they're full, because they're 95% full, because, as you said, so many people come over the borders, we're now looking at the potential for tent cities. Do you think that degrades our ability to give these children who, you know, are really largely innocent of anything, they're kids, the care that is required?
Our partners at HHS are responsible for this, the conditions, the setting, what they're doing, and what I understand they're looking at are very modern structures. They are soft-sided as in a tent, but it's nothing like a tent that you and I would use to go camping. These are professionally built facilities designed specifically for this purpose.
Deputy Commissioner, you've worked in Border Patrol since the mid-1980s, and we know that you're doing your job. You're a law enforcement guy. You deal with people. Your staff are people who follow the law and enforce it. But you just mentioned that a lot of your staff are family people. And if I were designing policy, I'd probably want input from somebody like you who has been involved in this for as long as you have. What, if we were collecting advice, if we were trying to make the best policy around, what do you have to say about separating families, separating children from their parents?
We want people to, if they have an asylum, if they're actual refugees from someplace, they should go to a port of entry and make that claim. We don't want people crossing the border illegally because it's dangerous. Them paying smugglers in Mexico deteriorates the rule of law in Mexico and makes that border more dangerous. They're fueling cartel activity with this cash. So we want people that are refugees to come to a port of entry to make that claim.
What about the point that some people make, on both sides, by the way, wherever you are politically, is that these kids are becoming political pawns?
They're part of what we have to address. If they weren't part of this flow, we would be doing better on the border with drugs, gang members, and illegal aliens. We wouldn't be distracted by this humanitarian mission that we're forced to do alongside the law enforcement work that we do.
I know this is a tricky question, but if you were the one in charge of making the policy to deal with the situation we've got right now, would you change anything?
No, I wouldn't, because we need to send the message that crossing the border is illegal. There has to be a consequence to that activity. We'll get less of it if that works. These are policies, these are steps that we asked the Secretary and the Attorney General to take. If you apply a consequence to illegal activity, you get less of it. That's what we're asking for.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.